Hello and welcome to Tech24 with me, Rebecca Bowring. Coming up in this edition of the programme, antitrust woes, suicides at Foxconn, nudged out by Samsung, and a Mac attack. Just some of the hurdles of the post-jobs era, but profits are surging along with demand in the East. Tech24 takes you inside Apple. Plus in Test24 world premiere, get a fresh angle on the French presidential elections with France 24's 360-degree live broadcast. What kind of company will Apple be after I've gone? A question attributed to Steve Jobs in the book Inside Apple by Adam Lashinsky. Over 6 months after the visionary CEO passed away, we can start to answer it. Apple has faced a string of challenges of late, ranging from a legal spat over price fixing in the e-book market to a cyber attack on Mac computers denting its reputation for top-notch security. But its products remain as popular as ever. Profits were up 94% over the last year. Sales of Macs, iPhones and iPads hit a new high in the March quarter, with demand soaring in China. Eric Olander joins me now in the studio. So Eric, how do you judge Apple has been coping with all of this in this post-Steve Jobs era, and is the sheen coming off its image?
94% profits were up. Now remember, these are profits up in recession-bound Europe, in the United States and Japan. So imagine when these economies start getting bigger and bigger, the sheen is definitely not coming off of Apple. It, of course, is the company that everybody loves to hate. And they love to hate it in part because it's so successful. It makes it a very easy target, but at the end of the day, Apple continues to deliver innovation. Apple continues to deliver products that people actually want. We've been talking, throughout the past couple of weeks about the troubles of RIM and Nokia. Clearly, the market on those brands has been very definitive, and the market's responded on Apple by saying people cannot seem to get enough of these products.
Love to hate, but also love to emulate, we could also say.
Well, it's very difficult to emulate. People say they want to be more like Apple, they want to be more like Steve Jobs, but at the end of the day, it's very, very difficult, in part because he was, well, for lack of a better word, a tyrant. He was, someone who was absolutely intolerant when it came to compromising and mediocrity, and that's one of the reasons why he's made products that are so beautiful and at the end of the day people love. Now, I sound like the Apple fanboy that I am. There are problems with Apple, and we can talk about that.
We've enumerated some of those already. Now, Lashinsky says in his book that he doesn't believe Apple will ever get over the loss of Steve Jobs and that it will stop eventually being an insanely good company. Do you think Tim Cook can prove him wrong?
Well, I mean, at some point we're going to have to get past this. Is Tim Cook the new Steve Jobs? He's not the new Steve Jobs. Tim Cook is Tim Cook. Tim Cook brings a totally different management style. He brings a background in supply chain. He brings a background in production management. So he is a very, very different person. But at the end of the day, will Apple stop performing? Sure. I mean, who knows? But at the end of the day, people have also been predicting the demise of Apple for 20 years now, and it still hasn't happened. That's not to say it'll go on forever like this, but it's certainly a very easy thing to say one day it'll end up, being like every other company. And so far, they've been proving their critics wrong.
Do you think one of the secrets of its success is the fact that it's a closed system? It's a very maverick one as well, we have to say, and that's something else that Lashinsky points out in the book, that it doesn't have general managers like a lot of businesses do, and it doesn't really care about Wall Street, for instance. But it is part of a closed system like we see in China, like we see on Facebook, and they're all working pretty well.
Well, we're in this era now, and it's a very, very different era than we've had for the past 20 years, which was the open internet, open systems. What are open systems? Open systems is Android, open systems is Microsoft Windows. These are systems that really make themselves very, very flexible, but they also cause a lot of problems. Viruses have been a problem. Incompatible devices on Android. Some Android uses 2.3, some use 3.3, some use 3.4. You have none of those problems on Apple. If you look at the trends going forward, again, we talked about Facebook and China and Apple and ExxonMobil. What do these four companies have in common? They're closed systems. That is, they don't necessarily assimilate to the outside world. They force the outside world to accept their terms. And at the end of the day, some people like that, some people don't, but it provides sometimes a better user experience.
Now, we know Apple remains immensely popular and immensely productive and profitable, but it's also having to battle really hard against Samsung at the moment, isn't it? Which is this tussle at the top of the tree. Should it worry?
It depends. Apple's never really decided that it wants to be number one. Apple wants to be the most profitable, and that's something that's done extremely well over the past 20 years. But being number one has never been their objective. Take, for example, BMW. BMW as a car never wanted to be the GM. It always wanted to own that luxury, high premium, high profitable market segment of the market. That's where Apple is. So Apple doesn't necessarily want to be the mass provider that Samsung is. That said, they are competing in the Galaxy Tab area, the Galaxy tablets and the Galaxy cell phones. Those are high-end $600 cell phones. That's where they're competing, and that's the only part of Samsung where they're going to compete against them.
And just finally, Apple sales in China set to double this year, so obviously that's a very lucrative market for them. There are some obstacles that we've mentioned, for instance, this controversy at Foxconn where workers are threatening to commit mass suicides over pay. Also a legal tussle in the iPad trademark with a company called ProView, which is just about to go bankrupt. What does Apple need to do, though, to keep the upper hand in the East? And will the iPhone 5 have anything to do with that?
Well, 20% of Apple's revenues now come from China. This is a market that that Apple never really anticipated being this important of a player for it. Now, on the question of the suicides, that was several years ago. 14 young workers at Foxconn committed suicide. At the end of the day, though, this is a production system that has hundreds of thousands of people. Apple is making commitments to change its processes, to change its work environments. Apple's not innocent in this at all, but however, putting the burden for all of those suicides squarely on Steve Jobs and Apple's shoulders, to me, doesn't seem entirely fair.
But clearly Apple knows how powerful the Chinese market is.
It's their second most important market behind the United States now.
Thanks very much for all of that, Eric. Stay with us. Test 24's next. Now it's time for a world premiere here on Tech 24. We're giving you a whole new perspective on elections coverage, quite literally, with the first live broadcast of 360-degree video. Eric, how do we watch?
This was very cool. So in the first round of the French presidential elections on the France 24 website, we debuted this new live 360 on our French version of our website. What it allowed the user to do, and the reason why it was so groundbreaking, is that you could circle 360 degrees around the environment of our French news set. Now that by itself, that technology's been around for quite some time. What's distinct and unique about this is you could access it on your mobile device, your Apple tablet or your iOS phone. Now that really was very neat. So people, no matter where you were following the elections, you could spin 360 degrees. It's a product created by a company called Digital Immersion, and it's really the next step in what we've called interactive television. We've been hearing about interactive television now for God knows how long. Now we're starting to see it actually be here. You can spin around, see the guests, you have the guest names, and you become the director.
So I can control my own cameras.
You control your own cameras, spinning it around if you want to follow a guest, if you want to follow the anchor. All of that can be done by you, and it's really the trend that we're going towards what we've called connected TV. Connected TV is, television's connected to the internet. Now this ability to interact with the TV really puts control in the hands of the user.
20,000 people downloaded that app the first time around. Of course, the second round of the elections on Sunday.
We'll be doing it once again, so if you're curious to see what it looks like, go to the French version of the France 24 website at france24.com/fr. Take it for a spin. Also on your tablet and your iPhone, you can literally play with it around, and it's really just great fun. Is it by itself, is it anything amazing? Well, it's a neat gadget, but at the end of the day, it's showing you the direction that we're going in and the trend is towards more user control.
Helps us get more and more immersed in the elections as well.
Exactly.
Thanks very much, Eric Olander. That's just about it from us for now. Do catch up with us, of course, on the social network. Go to the URL coming up in the corner of your screen, and do remember to follow us on Twitter. Now, our closing video this week involves one of those intensely addictive little smartphone games. Draw Something is a bit like Pictionary for iOS and Android. Zynga recently bought its parent company. Well, this animation explores 15 different types of Draw Something players. The question is, which one are you? See you next week.